Well, that's the end of the formal message time this morning, and I hope that at least a few of you have gone ahead and sent some text messages in to be able to ask some questions. If not, here's the number. Go ahead and text your questions to this number right here, and we're going to be inviting questions, and I'm going to be doing question and answer. Part of the reason I love to do this is that, church so oftentimes is a one-way communication, and I think it's not only allowable, but really important in your faith to ask questions, and that there's no questions that are out of bounds. And if I don't know the answer to questions, I'll be glad to say I don't know the answer to that question, because I don't pretend to know everything, but I love to be able to give credible answers to whatever's on your mind, not necessarily what's on my mind. So I'm trusting that some good things have happened, and our text guys have sorted some things through, and so I'm going to invite them to go ahead and shoot some questions out here today, and we'll do our best to try and answer them. So help me out here, tech guys. There we go. Okay, I hear a lot of Christians say, guard your heart. What does that mean? Does it make it difficult to have relationships? That's a great question. Guard your heart, for it's the wellspring of life. This is a Bible passage that's there. And what it's talking about in guarding your heart that's not a relational boundary that's supposed to be put up between you and another person. It doesn't affect your relationships. As a matter of fact, the greatest command in the Bible is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And when you do that, you give yourself in a degree of vulnerability that you may get hurt. People who love deeply have the possibility of being hurt deeply as well. And that's not what guard your heart is being talked about. In that case, it's being talked about as your character, your connection with God, the soul of who you are. Make sure that you don't give in on the little things in life. Make sure that you don't create small compromises in the spiritual world, because if you do, that's your wellspring of life. Small compromises lead to bigger compromises, lead to bigger drift. So guard your heart carefully. It's not talking about the relational realm. It's talking about the realm of character and spirituality in that case. All right, let's go ahead and do another one. What do you believe about mediums and psychics? Can they communicate with demons or spirits? Okay, I got a couple of thoughts about mediums and psychics. I thought something like this might come up when we have the message about demons. And the first thing is, I think a whole bunch of them are just fakes. I think there's a lot of them out there that are phony, that are entertainers, that are just trying to turn a buck, and that they have absolutely nothing real that's happening with them spiritually. But I do believe that in some cases, when people go to mediums and psychics, and the mediums and psychics themselves, they are opening themselves up to a spiritual world that's very real. And if you're not careful, you can encounter some demonic power in that spiritual arena. Can they communicate with demons or spirits? I think that sometimes there are demons that are interacting with the mediums. And it's a very dangerous place to go to give yourself over to that. As part of what I was saying, is one of the doorways that you can open yourself up to a spiritual world that will be very damaging for you. So I would encourage you to avoid mediums and channelers at all costs, and not engage with them for any reason. We see one person, Saul, with the witch of Endor in the Bible doing this, and the consequences were incredibly destructive, and I just don't want anybody to be going there. It's a painful and very real spiritual experience in some cases. All right, let's hit the next one. This is easy, right? Okay, how do I interact with same-sex couples when I don't support these relationships? Can I attend a wedding or send a gift? Okay, great question. I'll answer the first one first and then the second one second. How do I interact with same-sex couples when I don't support the relationships? Here's the easy answer. Love them. Love them just like anybody else in this world. The truth is, anybody that you interact with in this world has a sin issue, has a sin problem with God. Everybody does. We're all equal. So you could ask the same question, how could I interact with Pastor Mark when I know he's got a sin issue behind him? And the truth is, I would say, I would like for you to love me. That's the answer. How do I interact with someone who's in a same-sex relationship? You love them with the love of Jesus. Now, is there a moral issue that's there in the Bible? Yes, there is. The Bible teaches that sexuality is designed for one man and one woman in a lifetime relationship. But it doesn't say cut off relationships or hurt people. Some of my good friends, Kelly and I, in most every house we've lived in, except the one that we live in right now, have had neighbors who were in same-sex relationships. And for us, we went after those relationships. We hung out with those people. We shared meals. We had game nights. We did enjoyable things with them and found them to be delightful people who helped our lives have more joy as we were involved with them. And we hope that we gave them joy. And there were opportunities in that context to share with them the love and the truth of Jesus. And we hope that we were a positive influence in their lives, and we're grateful for the role they played in our life. I had one person who was an accountability partner with me for years who struggled with same-sex attraction. He was a believer, and he chose not to give in to that, but we created a very close friendship, and I learned a lot and grew a lot from him, and I hope he learned a lot and grew a lot from me as well. So interact with love. Sometimes Christians make the huge mistake of treating homosexuality as the ultra sin, and so we cut off all kinds of relationships, and that's something that is against what the Bible would teach us to do. We got to just say, hey, we love everybody equally, no matter what kind of baggage we're bringing to the table. So the second half is a little bit sloppier. Can I attend a wedding or send a gift? My question that I would say is, I think there's some case-by-case basis there, and it depends on what the meaning is of you attending the wedding. If you're attending the wedding and say, I'm supporting you as a friend and I really like you and I want to be here for a day that's a big day in your life, you say, I would attend a wedding that is of a gay couple, if that was the intention that was behind it and they understood where my heart was. As a pastor, the other end of the spectrum is, could you marry people who were a homosexual couple? For me, the answer is absolutely not. That's something that is not under the covenant of God, and so it's something that I could not do. And then you've got some of the sloppy in-between ones that are, could I stand up, or what if it's my kid, or other things like that. And I think that needs an awful lot of discernment, and there's not just clear legalistic rules or biblical boundaries that are there for that. And I would pray for you as you do that on a case-by-case basis. Sending a gift, if that's the kind of friendship you have and you feel led to do that, then send the people a gift for what's going on there. But the key thing is, love people in the midst of what's going on in their lives. All right, ready for another easy question? You guys ready to we'll just sail through these babies, right? All right. Someone is just setting me up here. Someone is setting me up. Okay, how old is the earth? A few thousand years or millions of years? I think the answer to that question is that the Bible is not clear on what the age of the earth is. Oftentimes, people will want to take passages like Genesis chapter 1, 5, and 11 and overlay on top of those chapters a 21st century scientific grid and try and make it say something that it doesn't say. And I think that's a huge mistake in biblical interpretation. One of the most important things in biblical interpretation is to take into consideration the genre of literature and what would it mean to its original audience. When we say, hey, I think that this was intended for a 21st century scientific mind, that misses 90% of the biblical audience, and in my mind, that's a huge mistake. So the Bible is not designed to tell us what the age of the earth is. Now, with that being said, Christians fall into two major camps. There are some that say, hey, I believe that the Bible is 6,000 to 10,000 years old. These are called young earth Christians, and that is a valid, possible biblical view. That shows good biblical scholarship that's behind it, and you can make a case for that, and that would be just fine. And there are other people who say, I believe that the earth is an old earth. Earth 4.7 or so billion years old, and the universe 13-some billion years old, and that's a valid biblical viewpoint. When you take into consideration all of the things that you find not only in Genesis, but also in Job and the Psalms, which incidentally, Job and the Psalms each have more verses about creation than Genesis does. And when you take the whole into account, you could biblically come to either conclusion. And then I think it's important for us to take not only the Bible into consideration, but also to take the book of nature, of creation that God created. Because God communicates to us through His special revelation of the Bible and through His general revelation of creation, and we need to look at both of those two things carefully together. Most people in the church already know that I'm an old earth guy. That's where I stand. But there are other elders, pastors, people in the church who would be young earthers, and that's also a respected viewpoint at Christ Community Church. And it's not something that we divide over. It's something that we say, hey, there's room for disagreement in the midst of this, and that's okay for Christians to disagree with each other on secondary issues. All right, let's hit the third one, or for a fifth or 10th, or however many questions we've done. If you have something to pray for, should you continue to pray for it daily or just ask once and then wait on God? You know, there's a great parable that Jesus told about the persistent widow who came and prayed over and over and over again. And the idea was that she came and she was making her request over and over, and just because she was annoying, she got what she wanted. I mean, that's really what happened in the parable. And what Jesus is trying to say is, hey, be persistent in your prayers. Keep on coming to God. Because the worst case scenario, and this is the worst case scenario, is God loves you and he wants you to show up and be in his presence. You're his child and he loves for you to come and ask for things, and you get more time in the presence of God. Best case scenario is that God does eventually answer your prayers the way that you want them to be answered, and that's a very real possibility. But persisting in prayer is something that is a virtue in the Bible, and not babbling on and on like the pagans. Jesus warns against that, so you don't have to just say the same thing over and over and over again ritualistically, but repeatedly coming to God with a request that's on your heart is certainly valid and encouraged in the Bible. All right. Ho, ho, ho. This is a very interesting question that I was not ready to talk about right now. The book Heaven is for Real is a book that's being made into a movie. Do you believe that story? I'm going to give you a little bit of a teaser on this one. This is kind of a fun thing. Heaven is for Real is a book about a little boy who I think was 3 years old, and he had a near-death experience, and he had divine encounters that defy any kind of natural explanation. I mean, it's just hard to explain this in any naturalistic kind of a way. And he says he visited heaven and he saw certain things that he would never know about. It became a best-selling book. And it's been made into a movie. The movie's coming out on Easter weekend. So Easter weekend, you'll be able to see the movie that's about it. And it's not only a story that's got some interesting supernatural elements, it's a Nebraska story. It comes from Imperial, Nebraska, right here in our own backyard. And so that's coming out. And what most of you don't know, but you will know right now, is that we're having an event where we're bringing the little boy and his dad to Christ Community Church just a couple of weeks after that to be able to tell their story. So, yeah. So you guys can be looking forward to that happening. And during that time, I'm going to be teaching a 4-week series on heaven, where you'll get a lot of the understanding of my answer to that last question. And I'm not going to undermine it right now, but you guys will get to hear more about that. Consider that as a little teaser for April and May. All right. All right, this is the last question, and then I got to wrap it up. All right, we talked about bad spirits. Are there good spirits on earth? The Bible doesn't talk about them as good spirits, but there certainly are beings called angels, which primarily have 2 functions we see in the Bible. One is that they're messengers, 2 is that they're warriors, and that they are in messengers. They are sent by God to communicate things to human beings, sometimes in supernatural ways. Sometimes they're there for protection. Sometimes we see a war, like we see in the book of Daniel, where the archangel Michael is battling against the prince of Persia in a prayer encounter. So there are very real good spirits that we would call angels biblically that serve those kinds of functions. And those are in this world, but that would have to be for a different passage, because that wasn't this morning's passage. So that's it for question and answer. Was that okay, guys? You glad we did question and answer this morning?